I'm Nick Stevens. I'm a senior technician with Frog Environmental, and today we're just going to quickly go through why we or how we would more efficiently use a field for deposition of silt in terms of polishing. Within Frog Environmental, we use two elements when we talk about treatment. One is a bulk dropout. This is where you generally use a gel flocculant block to take out the majority of silt loading in your surface water, and the polishing is what we do after that generally, and this is a way of just taking that last little bit of silt out of a system before we outfall to a stream, watercourse or swale feature. Generally, one of the things we find on a lot of construction sites are untouched fields. These are fantastic resources to be used to filter out silt. Generally, a field will have some ability to filter out silt naturally. If you keep just putting silt onto that field, it has a finite capacity. At that point, your silt will then start pouring off the field. Using gel flocculants before you get to the field means that you flocculate the loose silt and you can get far more out of that field. Like I said, one way of doing that is for a pipe reactor, as you're pumping from your attenuation pond or similar, through a lay flat, and then the water then spills out over to the field. We can then use a flock mat. These are 2 metre by 1 metre coir nets constructions with a coir pith in. They also have gel flocculant treatment on top. And again, these cause a flocculation of the fine silt particles. Generally in ditches and things, we use this with water coming down onto the mat. In a field setting, we don't use them like that. We actually use them with the gel flocculants face down. So if you've got water coming in from our lay flat here, the water would come into contact with a flocculant underneath the mat, and what you're actually using this mat in this circumstance for is to direct the flow along the field, so you get more out of your field. If you didn't do this, you end up with just a preferential channel down through your field. You don't get very much area use. This way you actually disperse the water laterally across the field, and it's just simply a case of taking your mats, overlap them a little bit. As the silt flocculates underneath, you start to get more direction of material along the field, and you'll typically set these up whilst your system is pumping. You're actually trying to follow the flow across a field, and that, like I said, disperse the water across. When we've got to a point where we want to direct the water, we put the end of. We essentially put these in like herringbones down the field. If we're finding that one mat treatment, if we're not using a pipe reactor and we're just using the mats, one mat treatment isn't working, it's just not quite enough, we can then put a second system in. This doesn't have to run the same way. If your field is even, there's nothing to stop this herringbone going the other way. Like I said, you're following the flow through the field, trying to disperse the sediment across the field as much as possible to get the most out of it. In this example, we're using 2 treatments at this point. If you still had a little bit of sediment coming off the bottom, you then put 3 in. It's mainly to stop that shortcutting. Water will usually accumulate on the field, find the easiest path, track down to whatever your outfall is. This way we get more of the use of the field, because settlement is a function of area, and that's what you're trying to get out of it. Once you've put them in position, generally we will fix them in place with engineering pins with caps on it. But you can use biopegs, or you can use sandbags. Anything that's going to give it a bit of weight, and it's usually only initially when you need to weight it down. It could be that, after a few days of it actually being in operation, you can come along and remove a lot of these pins or sandbags that are holding things in position if you're worried about trip hazards as such. The flock mat is 100% compostable. It is treated with a flocculant, so if you have to have permission to use the flocculants on site. But as long as you dispose of them within the confines of your site, that's not a problem. You can also take these mats and use them somewhere else to stabilise loose silt, or as they are completely compostable, you can leave these in situ. Not only are they going to bind into the grass will grow through them, but they also create a little bit of a different habitat, so you can increase biodiversity if you're in a monoculture field, for example.